Hello everyone, so today I wanted to give a little review of a book that I've been reading for 3 months. It was challenging because I read it in the original, and I'm just going to give a review. I'm going to talk about what I thought about the book, and obviously as you have read the title, you know that this book was 100 Years of Solitude, so I read it in Spanish, and I'm just going to talk about what I thought about the book, my impressions, some things that I didn't like, and some things that I thought were amazing. So, I read the book on my iPad. I had this version, and I had a huge font because it's easier to read like that, but it resulted in being like 1,300 pages because the font was so big. So, yeah, I was a little bit intimidated by the size of the book, although in reality it is not that big. And of course, as I was reading it in Spanish, it was quite difficult for me to understand because I've been learning Spanish for like 2 years now. But still, I tried to translate some of the words that I didn't know, and I grasped the concept of the book. So that was a success, I would say. I gave 100 Years of Solitude 5 out of 5 stars because I'm a fan of magical realism, and because this is the genre that really is something that I like to read and I like to see in literature. So I gave it 5 out of 5 stars, also because even though the book was quite long, I still felt like there was always something happening, and it kind of moved the plot, which made it easier for me to stick with the book for 3 months, which were kind of a torture. But so my overall impression of the book is that I don't want to say it's interesting, of course, but for me, the book was a blend of magical realism and history of Spanish speaking countries, and I really enjoyed that. I really liked the characters, although I'll talk about the characters and what I liked and didn't like about them a bit later. My overall impression of the book was that it was something that I really like to see in literature. So, for example, War and Peace is also something that I really like because it is quite long and you get immersed in this new world. For example, in 100 Years of Solitude, you get immersed in this world of Macondo and how they deal with stuff, and so you feel like it's part of you. And I really like these immersive experiences because it's just more fun, and short stories can be interesting, but they don't provide this feel for how everything's going on and is happening. So I wanted to start by talking a little bit about what made me interested in the book in the first place. So if you have read the book, or if you haven't read the book, maybe this is something that you haven't or have heard about. And it's basically that Gabriel Garcia Marquez started to write the book while he was returning from some kind of holiday, and so he was driving in his car with his family, and he had this concept in his mind of a book that he wanted to write. And so he basically turned around and went to a place where he could be alone, and he just sat down and started to write the book. And he was finished, I don't know how long it took him to write that actually. And so he immersed himself in this world, and I think that you can read that in the text of the book because it is an immersive experience. So I don't know if that's something that you have heard about, or maybe that it's something new for you, but I really like this little story of how he started to write the book. So, history. I wanted to talk a little bit more about the history. So the book is basically, from what I've read, it's basically a history of Colombia, and it's the history of some of the important events that happened in Colombia. Now, as a person who doesn't know anything basically about Colombia, this was not something that I necessarily picked up, although there are some episodes in the book where you can see that it's probably something that happened in real life. And these are usually very tragic events that leave a mark, whether you know history of the country or not. And I'd say that I didn't appreciate the history that I was supposed to appreciate in the book just because I didn't know much about it. And I think that in a few years, I will probably learn more about the country, and then I'll reread the book with a higher level of understanding of the background of the book, and I'll probably see some other aspects that I didn't notice while reading the book. What I did notice were characters, and I'm really interested in psychoanalyzing characters while I'm reading the book, because it's something that I feel like can teach you a lot about humans, and you can just practice trying to understand who you're talking to, what their motivation is, what they're interested in, and what I didn't like about characters. So I'd say that I enjoyed the characters because they have their own personalities and kind of distinct features that make them more interesting for you. For example, female characters are really not bright, but they do stand out because, well, of course, because they don't have the same names as male characters. I don't really remember who was who when you're talking about Aurelianos or other, I don't even remember their actual names. So I don't remember much about male characters because I wasn't really interested in them. I couldn't really relate my experiences in my life to them, although they are interesting and they have, so all characters in the book have this kind of image that is very well cut out. And so when you are, for example, reading about one person, you know who they are, and they're not really complex because you don't get to learn much about them. And this is one of the main things that I didn't enjoy, because there are lots of characters who are very interested and whose thought process would be very interesting to analyze and to see. And for me, this was something missing. And after reading the book, you kind of feel, well, I kind of felt like I didn't know the characters that well, because I knew their actions, I knew kind of how some things influenced them, but I didn't know what they were thinking. It was only something that was written from the point of an outsider, and I couldn't really see their own thought process, and that was something that I really missed in the book. That's why I like books that have next to no plot, because I'm more interested in seeing who the characters are, how they think, how they interact with how they choose to interact with the world, and that's something that was missing for me in the book. Although I understand that if Gabriel Garcia Marquez tried to write about the character of all the people in the book and he tried to write about their thought processes, that would probably be, the book would probably be the length of War and Peace, but that's something that I would actually really enjoy. So one more thing that I really enjoyed about the book was magical realism. And for those of you who are not really familiar with the genre, this is the genre where you basically have this plot of real events, of things that happen on a daily basis in the lives of every human being, but then you have these little moments of magic in the book. So, for example, someone has superpowers, or someone does something that is not ordinary for a person to do, that is really magical. And it's treated in a way that shows you that for people in this book and in this genre, this is something that is normal. So, for example, someone has supernatural powers, but everyone treats this person as if it was normal. And so you don't have this kind of fantasy sort of vibe. It's really interesting for me because it kind of adds to the perspective and to how we view the world. And I've read some reviews of the book, and many people say that in Colombia that is something that is part of national identity, because people there are more likely to, interpret mundane things as something magical or something that is, you know, they can add some magic to their stories about their past because it's something that they're used to, and they have that on a national kind of conscious level. So that is something that is very interesting for me. And one more author who writes in the genre of magical realism who I have read is Haruki Murakami. He's a Japanese author, and I've read his books before, and I really like how he writes in this genre. It's something that I would really recommend if you have read 100 Years of Solitude and would like to try some other authors who write in the same genre, if that's something that you enjoy. Okay, so my final conclusion for the book would be that it's a great read, it's a classic for a reason, and I really liked the genre, the plot, the characters, although there were some things that I personally didn't really enjoy. This is still a book that made a huge impression on me, and I'm currently writing an article about it. I'm trying to analyze female characters because I'm really interested in them and how they are perceived by society. And I just wanted to say that if what I've said makes you interested to read the book, I suggest that you do it, that you don't really think about the size of the book and just try to get into it and maybe see if that's something that you enjoy. Thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you next time. Bye!